everybody. Welcome to Exit Podcast. Today's special guest is Jonathan Stark. He's a solo consultant, coach, author, podcast host, and much more. How are you, Jonathan? Welcome to the show, man.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you.
I recognize the name. Ryan has actually, I think he, as mentioned, you have been a coach for him in the past. And so I'm excited for this conversation. He's talked a lot about you over the years. Why don't you give us just a brief kind of overview of who you are and how you got started doing what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, I am a former software developer who's on a mission to rid the world of hourly billing. I was working at a dev shop in 2005, and I was promoted to VP, which meant I was managing all the developers. And when I made that shift, I found out what all their salaries were, and I knew what their billable hours were. We were billing by the hour. And I was like, wow, if we were going to hire someone, I'd want to hire someone like our most junior developer and not people like our best developers. And I was like, that's crazy. I should want to be hiring the best developers possible. But the great developers were making twice as much money as the junior developers. And they all were billed out at the same rate. The junior developers were slower, so we were making more money off of them and paying them less. So I was like, this is not good. Like, something is wrong here. This is bad for our clients. I shouldn't be incentivized to do slower work with worse, less talented people. I should want the most talented people I could find. And after puzzling over that for a couple of weeks, it took me a long time, a couple of weeks, and I was like, oh, wait, it's because we bill by the hour. And if we gave fixed prices for projects, you'd absolutely want your best developers, and they'd be way more profitable too, because they'd be fast, and everything would make sense all of a sudden. So I sort of went off on my own to figure out how to do that, because I had no idea how to do that. And over time, the people that I knew from that company and other companies that did similar work to us were like, how are you not billing hourly? How did you not go out of business? How are you not getting killed on scope creep? How are you doing so well? Can you teach us how to do it? Because we all hate hourly billing. We hate doing timesheets. And so from there, that was 2006 when I went solo. And from there to 2016, I just sort of informally taught people how to do it, or at least what I was doing, what worked for me. And then in 2016, 10 years after I started doing it, I wrote a book about it called Hourly Billing is Nuts. And then that was that was sort of my official start date for going out of software development and mobile consulting and into coaching people on how to price their work instead of, rent themselves out by the hour.
Love it. Yeah, no, I think it's one of the things, and that's what's so interesting about how I came to know Jonathan. There's a cadre of these guys that are hourly, or value-based pricing experts, the Blair Anns and the David Bakers and these kind of people of the world. Mm-hmm. And Jonathan, what I really appreciate about his approach is that he's very, I guess, honest and no nonsense about things. And those guys are too. So I'm not saying that they're bad and he's good or whatever, but what I really appreciate is his delivery. But it's funny because in his background as a software development guy, and me as like a creative person, coming from like the agency side or, graphic design side, it was interesting that he was the guy that I chose to actually end up hiring as a coach, because there are other guys that are more, I guess, in my industry. But I really appreciated his approach. And I found that what I learned working with Jonathan has really helped me out a ton in what ended up being future work, working in software companies and things like that, because it gave me a lot of perspective that I didn't have. But even now, and maybe this is something we can start to dig into with value-based pricing or moving away from hourly billing, we'll say. I think a lot of people have trouble deriving value. And I know that even after all these years of practice, I'm still terrible at it. And so I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, well, if we're not billing by the hour, then what are we billing by?
Sure. So, so crash course on value-based pricing. So first, let's define a couple of terms. There are three words that are used interchangeable, and that's normally fine in typical conversation to use these three words: cost, price, and value. Those are usually kind of interchangeable in a normal conversation, but for our purposes, it's important that we know the difference between those three words. So cost, if you're the seller, you're the person, you're the consultant or whatever, the designer, you're selling your services, you have costs, and the amount of and your cost, basically, the quick subjective way to calculate your cost is just think to yourself, what's the least amount of money I would do this engagement for? Like that's your walkaway price. I wouldn't do this for a penny less than $5,000. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm experienced. I've been doing this for 10 years. I got a pretty good idea of how much level of effort this might be. And I wouldn't even get out of bed for less than $5,000 to work with this client. So that's your cost. That's how much, that's not your price. That is your cost. So that would be you making no profit. If you sold the gig for $5,000, that's you making no profit. So on the other end of the spectrum, the far end, you've got value, which is the inverse of this. It's the most the client would pay for your assistance. That's how much it's worth to them. It's not worth a penny more. If it's worth $100,000 to them, that's it. They're not going to pay more than that. They would actually be angry if they paid $100,001. So the value is the most the client would pay for the thing. The cost is the least you would accept for the thing. And the price is somewhere in between those two numbers. So the price has to be higher than your cost, or you're not going to want to do it. And the price has to be lower than the value to the client, or they're not going to say yes. So finding a price in between your cost and value is the basic concept of pricing in general. That's not even value-based pricing, but those three terms basically always have to be true. There's some outliers, but those things all need to be true for everyone to be happy, for both parties to feel like they made a profit, that they're glad they did the thing. So like the client, obviously the seller is going to make a profit because they would have done it, for not a penny less than 5,000. They end up getting 10,000. So they're like, cool. That's like double what I would have done it for at the very bottom, my floor. And the client is like, I would have paid close to $100,000 for that, and I only had to pay 10,000. So I'm psyched. I'd rather have the thing that they did for me than the $10,000. So you want the price always to be in between, somewhere in between the cost and the value of the two parties. Now the question is, how do you decide where to put the price? Yeah. What a lot of people do is they think of their costs. If we're not talking about hourly billing, they'll say, okay, maybe it'll take me, 100 hours, and I'm $50 an hour. So that's $5,000. So maybe I'll add 10% on top of that for scope creep or I don't know, admin or something like that. And we'll call it, what would that be? 5,500. And that'll be the price. So what they're doing is they're setting a price based on their cost. So that'd be cost-based pricing. They're not thinking about the value at all. They've not even spent a second wondering how much the project is worth to the client. So that's cost-based pricing. And that's what almost everyone does when they first try to give a fixed price. They calculate their costs and then they mark it up a little bit and they set a price based on their costs. And this will almost always get you in trouble because the price is way too low. So what ends up happening is there are always unexpected things that happen during a project, a non-trivial project. They're going to be surprises. Client's going to have an important change that they forgot to tell you about it, but it's actually important to the success of the project. And you're going to feel like you're losing money. I would have made more money if I just billed this by the hour the old way because the client kept changing their mind or the scope kept creeping or whatever. And this is how people get into trouble with fixed pricing because they do a cost-based approach. They don't mark it up anywhere near enough and they get killed and they say, I'm never doing this again. I'm going to do hourly. So what they don't realize is there's a thing called value-based pricing where you come at it from the other end, where you think, okay, you don't even think about what you're going to do. You don't even have a concept of what your cost would be because you don't know what you're going to do yet. Client comes to you and they say, hey, heard great things from Alice. Could we talk? I think, we might be able to do something together that would be mutually beneficial. Okay, great. We'll jump on a sales call. In that sales call, if you're not going to do cost-based pricing, you don't care what the scope is. You don't know what the scope is. It's uninteresting to you what the scope is. It doesn't matter because the first thing you have to find out is how much this is worth to the client. And this is where we get back to Ryan's original question. So how do you figure out what it's worth to the client? And we'll move on from there. So how do you do that? I call it the why conversation. Blair Enns, who you mentioned, he calls it the value conversation. Alan Weiss has a name for it. I can't remember, but this is just a way, sort of Socratic questioning way to understand why a client would bother even talking to you in the first place. And through this conversation, you uncover their underlying motivations and the business outcome that they're hoping that you'll contribute to. So
Yeah, and let me just interject real quick, Jonathan, on that why conversation. I actually just wrote down the why conversation right here. See, I still remember all this stuff. But what I really like about this, and I think it makes sense to maybe take a minute and really just kind of break down what it is I think that there's this built in, especially, and this is still my inner freelancer crying about it. But for a lot of people, I think that there's this fear, this sort of scarcity mindset where it's like, I'm willing to do anything to make this deal work. And what I really like about the why conversation, and I'll let you tell it, but there's a question in there that sort of is like, why me? And I think for a lot of people, that's like kind of that little gut check, like, oh man, I'm actively trying to talk people out of it. And I think if I remember right, I think that's sort of your point of view is you should be trying to talk people out of it, because if they still want to go forward, then by God, they're ready to buy.
It's going to close. Right. So you might as well try and talk them out of it, because they're going to talk themselves out of it. So you'd rather, if you send a proposal and then they have all of these, you haven't already tried to talk themselves out of it, they're going to find ways to talk themselves out of it. They're looking for a way to disqualify you. So if you aren't there while they're trying to do that, then you've got no way to reverse any of their objections or address any of their concerns. So you might as well bring it up while you're on the phone with them, instead of not bringing it up, spending hours writing a proposal, sending it over, them coming back with objections, and then you doing it, trying to reverse their objections way later after you've already set your prices. It's almost too late at that point. You want to get all of that stuff on the table before you even decide to write a proposal. So it's just way easier and faster. It's just much less work to face that fear, because I admit that people totally freak out about doing this. It's the hardest part of the why conversation, is getting your mouth to say the words, why would you hire someone expensive like me? Why not get your cousin Vinny to do it? You've got people internally that can do this. They have the skills. Why don't you put them on it? Why don't you outsource this to someone in an emerging economy? Why don't you do all of these other cheaper things when you know I'm going to be probably the most expensive option? You might as well have that conversation, because if you don't, they're going to be thinking all of those things when they read your proposal. They see this really high price and they're like, well, why don't I just send this to my cousin Vinny? It's like, find out why they can't do that or why they shouldn't do that in their own words and put it in the proposal. It's a genius move. I mean, it's hard to get yourself to do it, but if you can get the answers to that question and the other two categories of questions, why this and why now, the proposal writes itself. It's their words that you put into a template that just completely explains to anyone smart reading it why they'd be crazy not to do this. The whole argument is there, and it's from them.
So having that conversation up front, you're kind of like, by saying I'm the most expensive, why do you want to hire me? You're kind of alleviating that stress in advance and having them on the line when you're doing it. And I actually almost think of that as a sales ploy. Like, some people want the most expensive and you can get the same quality. They just it's like the Mercedes versus the Honda. Some people just want the Mercedes.
Yep.
And sometimes, having that high dollar mark actually lends you credibility over, not. Like, if you come in too low, lots of times people are going to just say, hey, he's not the right fit. His pricing doesn't make sense for us. We're usually in this tier. There's no reason we should go step down and go and hire someone who's low.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like an interesting concept to think about.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add, is one thing that it does too is it sort of anchors you into a different bucket, right? All of a sudden, and anchoring is something they talk about a lot in the sort of value-based world, is this idea of setting sort of, high watermark, right? And if you come out there and you're the cheapest guy in town, there's nowhere to move. You can't build up or add dollars or whatever you need to do. But if you sort of already set the expectation that, you as the client have told me why now this is important in this time, and here's why. Why this, you've explained to me why it is you've got to do this, whatever your business reason is or whatever for said task. And then, by anchoring yourself in the why me part as, not necessarily, I don't know, maybe it could be some ego, I guess, but you're positioning yourself as a high dollar consultant in this case. And so, but by doing that, then when you come with a high number, like they're already set for that, it's not so out of left field, you know what I mean? And so where if you have this kind of low dollar conversation, and then you hit them with this giant bill. There's such a disconnect between the two that it's like, okay, well, I don't even know why we're talking.
Right. And usually the answer is going to be something like, you're the only one we trust. This is really important. This is a big deal. And you came highly recommended from the only person I trust about this kind of thing. Or we read your book, or we've been listening to your podcast for 3 years. There's no one else we want to work with. We know you're going to be the most expensive, but it's worth that investment because this project is a mission critical for the business. And we wouldn't even know who else to talk to. We're not getting some from Upwork, So yeah, does this mean doing some marketing and positioning yourself as an expert at some particular thing, becoming the go-to person for some particular thing? Yes. Does that take a long time? Yes. Is it worth it? Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, well, and one thing that I love too, and this is, going back to why I thought Jonathan was a great coach years ago, was that the engineer brain does something that like the agency creative brain doesn't, or the freelance graphic design brain doesn't, which is there's a little bit more pragmatism built into this approach than there is in, like, if I go to another, creative guy, another agency guy or whatever, or a designer who can sort of empathize with my, squishy heart that doesn't want to make anybody upset, or whatever. But the pragmatic engineer brain looks at this, and you're solving a business problem, which is really the more mature or the appropriate way to look at a customer's problem, right? I mean, they're bringing you a business problem. This is integral to their company. And meanwhile, most creatives, or a lot of creatives anyway, are sort of saddled with this guilt, and they want to do whatever, but they're more focused on how they feel about it and not wanting to hurt your feelings than they are on the actual business outcome. And so I think that that's one of the strong cases for this style or this approach to this conversation. First of all, the why conversation, but also just value-based pricing in general.
I think most importantly, that's the way the buyer is looking at it. It doesn't matter if they're buying creative services or a roof for their garage. Like, what they're looking to trade some money for an outcome that's worth more than the money. They'd rather have the outcome than the money. So that's the way they're looking at it. In a B2B sale, that is the way the buyer is looking at it. A good buyer. There's bad buyers. You don't want them. They might be looking at it some other way, some sort of like they just negotiate everything because they get off on that or whatever. But a good buyer is like, look, we don't have time to fool around. We want the best. We believe that you are the best or one of the best. And we have to do this. We all agree we have to do this. We have to do it now. And we can't screw it up. We have to get it right the first time. So they trust you. That's the why me thing. It's almost always going to be, we trust you for some reason. We trust you as the go-to person for this specific situation. And in that case, they're willing to pay a premium because it's kind of like an insurance policy. They're increasing the odds that this will be a success.
So you have the why conversation with them, and you kind of alleviate that stress coming out of the gate. Now it's time to put the proposal together. Do you ever talk numbers in the why conversation, or do you avoid that until you put the proposal together and send it over?
It depends on what you mean by numbers. So I say numbers, but I won't say my prices. Some people are so good at, I think Blair Enns, who mentioned a couple of times, I think he is comfortable talking numbers in the initial sales call. I need to think about it a little bit. I need to think it through a little bit. I can't do it on the fly. I can, but I usually regret it. Sometimes I do it, but I almost always come in low. And then later I'm like, I didn't ask a couple of questions. So I recommend to people, don't talk prices in the sales conversation, the sales interview. Don't even think about, I don't even think about the scope of what I'm going to do until after we're off the phone. And I've got a sense of what the value is. And it's like, I brainstorm, like, what are 3 different ways I could approach this, 3 different tiers? But that's not your question. The question is, do you talk numbers? Yes, I do, but not prices. So I'll try and calculate value in the call. So I'll say something like, because I want to anchor high, like Ryan was saying. So I'm positioning myself as a luxury option, like you said, Mike. But I do want to position my prices as trivial compared to the potential value of the outcome. So I want to find out what they're planning to do. Like, let's say I'm going to build them some internal software system. And through the course of trying to talk them out of it with the why conversation, like, isn't there some easier way to do this? Couldn't you buy something off the shelf? Is there really nothing out there good enough? Couldn't you get Salesforce and modify it instead of building something from scratch? And as they answer these questions, they're going to say things like, well, we could do that, but that's going to be kind of expensive too. And really what we want to do is have an internal asset, because in 3 years we want to sell the company and we want to have a proprietary software system in-house that will be part of the valuation and asset for the business. Now, all of a sudden, we're not, instead of talking about features and what color they want the buttons to be, which is the normal conversation you'd have, now we're talking about real business outcomes and how they believe you can contribute to maybe reaching that goal down the road. So then I'll start talking about, well, how do you really know that investors are going to care about that, or buyers are going to care about that? And they'll give me answers. So I'll say, okay, well, like, how much difference do you think it would really make? Because, and here's where I'll say a number. I'll say, if you're going to pay me $1 million, let's say you pay me $1 million. Are you going to get positive ROI on a sale in 3 years if the price is $1 million? And they might say, well, right now we're doing, whatever, we're doing $10 million a year, and the multiple is like 2 or 3 times EBITDA. And if we believe, and we've talked to buyers who say that this would increase that to maybe a 5 or 10x multiple because it would be perceived more like a SaaS, then yeah, it's worth $1 million for sure. Which doesn't mean I'm going to set the price at $1 million. That's maybe what it's worth to them. That's in the ballpark of what it's worth to them. I might be able to set a price that's 100,000, 220,000, 500,000, 3 different prices, 3 different levels of involvement. And they're going to say, hell yeah. Like maybe they'll say, give me option 2 for sure. Or 3, I set my prices too low, and they pick 3 right out of the gate. So I won't talk those prices. I just need to think it over personally. And it works. It's fine to think it over. You don't have to do it on the fly. I never gave prices.
Yeah, you mentioned, like Blair might be the kind of guy that's expert enough to come out and do that, in a call. But I think, and I'm not like the Blair Ann's expert, but I believe that, he offers sort of a suite of services, and, so he probably knows his deal and he knows what it's going to cost. And, but like, if you're I just keep going back to my example, but like, if you're running an agency or something, like, the scope is different, or there's this or that. And I think if you just come out with an answer like that, like, it almost looks maybe a little amateur. Like, oh yeah, no, it's going to cost this amount of money. I don't even need to think about what you're saying. Don't worry about it. I already know.
Right.
So I think it's somehow worse to come out with like something that looks like a number. But to the point that Jonathan made about, anchoring really high, in this case, he said $1 million. When he drops a $500,000 invoice or a $500,000 proposal,
Well, yeah.
They go, oh, wow, God, that number seems awesome. That seems low by comparison, And and so it makes it all the easier to go, oh, okay, well, that seems right. It doesn't seem like he's ripping us off. He knows he could get $1 million, but he's offering or asking for less. And I think it actually does build some credibility. So I think it's good to say numbers, but yeah, I think it's hard to commit to stuff too quick.
I want to talk about their numbers, not my numbers. That's basically what it boils down to.
That makes sense. Yeah. I had a call the other day, and it was, are you available on this day? Can you do it? And I was already booked, and I could make arrangements to get someone else to do it. And I just threw out a number high, just more to see if they were actually legit and if they actually wanted me, rather than just wasting my time. And that was the vibe I was getting as they were price shopping. And so I just threw out a high number because it was another thing on my plate that I didn't need. And that's not normal for people like you, but in my industry, I get that a lot. And so sometimes I will just throw out a high number just to see if they can even play in that ballpark.
Yeah. So that works too. Yeah. That takes a lot. So the situation that you just described is exactly the time when people do that, which is, I don't want this job. I'm getting bad vibes from the client. I don't need this work. I don't need it. So like, that's the situation. If you're in that situation, you can do a much better job with these conversations, the why conversation. You don't want to go into any sales meeting desperate for the work. It's like, get your cash flow figured out. Do not be desperate for the work. Even if you really need the money, you have to come across like you don't need the work, or you won't be able to make yourself really ask these questions, because something in your brain is be like, I really need this. I really need this. You're going to lowball. You're going to agree to things that you know are red flags. You won't even see the red flags. They'll just zoom right past you. And then 6 months later, you'd be like, why did I do this again?
So I wanted to ask, and this is probably something you encounter a lot. I know it was a big struggle for me, and it's still something I struggle with now. But it's making that shift in perspective to caring more about them than about yourself, right? And like as we were talking about in the why, with the why conversation, you're trying to uncover their numbers or you're trying to understand what their needs are. But I still think a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially, but even senior people who just aren't great at this, still go into the business sometimes looking for the objectives of their company, not looking at the objectives of the other side. Mm-hmm. So in your coaching practice, like I imagine you encounter this sometimes where you've got to help people try and flip their script a little bit and get used to seeing things from the other side. Are there any tactics or tricks or things that you work on with you, the people that you coach in terms of trying to help them shift that perspective sort of permanently to I guess I've heard people call it, sort of like a service mentality or like I'm going to serve you versus a serve me kind of attitude?
Right. Well, it's more of a worldview. I don't know if I've got some tactics that help with this, but the big thing is the worldview of like, let's say I'm talking to someone who's in this sort of mentality of like, yeah, but I need, this is what I need. This is the way I want to work. This is the kind of work I want to do. It's all me. And I need to flip them to a world in which they understand that the way to get what they want, all those me things, all those I things, is to create value for other people. It's the only way, the only legal way. You have to create value for other people if you want them to give you their money. And if your business goals almost certainly involve money or they're directly related to money. So they might be lifestyle goals, amount of time you want to work, type of work you want to be doing. Fine. All of that stuff's fine. But the way to get it is to not clench up and be like people should value this thing that I do. I can't believe and they just sort of like think clients are all sort of monsters who don't value whatever your expertise is, whether it's design or Corinthian pottery or whatever. They're just like, can you believe nobody values Corinthian pottery? It's like, well, yeah, I can. But of course, your crab bucket of other Corinthian pottery professors are outraged like you are too. But it just doesn't, you can just be outraged about it as much as you want, but it's never going to get you where you want to go if this includes financial goals. And it always does, or they wouldn't be working with me. So if you think about it, so I'd try and flip the thinking. It's like, let's say that every single client you ever worked with was so happy with the engagement, the outcome, the results, that they built a statue of you in front of their building and they told all of their colleagues that they have to hire you for this particular thing. How would your business do? It would be great. Like if I sort of half jokingly tell people your product, like maybe you think your output, your deliverable is like wireframes, or your deliverable is a code repo, or your deliverable is features. No, your deliverable, the thing your business makes, is customer satisfaction. Ideally, customer delight. That is the thing you make. And if you're not making that, you're going to go out of business. So how do you make that? How do you make customer satisfaction? Well, it's a lot easier to make customer satisfaction if in the sales call, you get them to explicitly tell you what is going to satisfy them. Instead of saying like, oh, we need design. Okay, why do you need design? Like, how's that going to satisfy you? Why would you spend $500,000 on a brand redesign or something? That's crazy. How's that going to make you money? How's that $500,000 that you paid me not going to harm your business? And if they have an answer for that, then there's a gig. Then there's a possibility of working together. And they'll specifically say through this questioning process what they're going to measure to know that you did a good job. Because right now they're measuring something that tells them they need a brand redesign. So they've detected something that indicates to them that they need a brand redesign. Could be someone in the locker room at the country club told them their brand looks terrible. Could be that they had McKinsey consultant come in and say your brand is awful. It could be that clients are like, we don't want to recommend you to other people because it's embarrassing. Your website's embarrassing. But there's some signal that they're getting that told them they need a brand redesign. Okay, what's that going to do for you? How are you going to know? Sorry, not what's that going to do for you? How are you going to know that the work I do for you and deliver actually is going to move the needle. And let's say, well, the guy in the locker room at the country club will be like, wow, that's gorgeous. Or your clients will be recommending your people to your website, or whatever the thing that they were measuring, whatever that measurement is, it improves. It either goes up or goes down, whichever is the improvement direction. And now I've got an idea of how to satisfy them, which is much, much, much more specific than just doing the best practices of your industry and hoping that you try and move 100 needles a little bit, and you just hope that one of them is the needle that they're looking at. So instead, find out first which needle are they looking at, and then pour all of your energy into moving that needle. And it's much more likely that you're going to produce customer satisfaction at the other end of the assembly line.
Yeah, it's so funny because it's such a simple concept, but I think a lot of people still spend so much time guessing, and just trying to get stuff right, but they're not actually, it's not based on anything, or it's based on their assumption, or like you said, like the industry standard approach. It's like, it's so funny, we've talked a little bit about luxury positioning and things like that, but it's like one of, I think the criticisms I hear people say about value-based pricing and things like that is around the, what is value, right? So there's this conversation about what is value, what's real, what's perceived, all these things. And I don't think you can impose perceived value on people. And so to your point, like, maybe it's just the guy in the locker room. Like, he doesn't even care if it's a good business decision. He's just trying to please that guy. Like, so there's all kinds of things that motivate people, but in his world now, all of a sudden that's a really big deal to him. So it's very valuable to him. Ostensibly the Rolex and the Rolex replica are the same thing, but I want my green box or whatever it is. So it's like the perception of value there is, it doesn't have to be necessarily tied to reality. It's good if it's tied to a business metric or something, but I don't think you're going to be able to trick people into some motivation or some perception of value if it just doesn't exist. So that's why I think it makes so much sense to have the conversation or ask the questions that sort of evoke out of them what is their perception of value.
Yeah, flip it around. Be the buyer in any situation, because most people are on the buyer side of the table 100, maybe 1,000 times more than they are on the seller side of the table. And just imagine what it would feel like if you went into like a car dealership and some guy has a car he's got to move, and it's not the one you want. It doesn't tick your boxes, but he's not asking you about what boxes you need to tick. He's just pushing this car on you. That's what almost everybody in our industry does. They're just pushing the car. It's like, this is the thing I want to sell, instead of finding out what are the needs of this person who has expressed an interest in the thing they think, the solution they think we provide. They could be wrong, but they think you sell cars here. It's like, oh, I think I need a car. This place looks like they sell cars. I'm just going to explore this idea of buying a car. And you don't want some used car salesman pushing this like Kia Sorento on you when it's not going to do. You've got 10 kids, you need a minivan or whatever, it's like something completely different. Like, but the idea of someone, a salesperson, asking you about you, what will make you happy, what are the actual numbers you're looking at, being thoughtful, interacting with them like a business person, not like as a designer or a software developer or landscaper. You're thinking about them from a bit as a peer, like two people who both run businesses, understand business language, understand profit and loss statements, understand running a business. The business person on the other side who can write you a big fat check is going to trust you a lot more when they see that you're trying to tick their specific boxes. You understand them and the way that they are seeing the world. And just picture yourself in any situation, like, dear listener, for the next week, whenever you go somewhere, Starbucks, anywhere, imagine the person selling you the thing, trying to convince you that it's worth more than it is to you. There is no reality outside of perception. That value is a perception in the mind of the buyer, period. There's no abstract objective value for anything, nothing. It's completely abstract, completely subjective. And the only place you can find it is in the other person's head. No amount of thinking is going to get you that number.
It's funny how it's just a simple question. Ask them, what do you want? What do you need?
Yeah.
Tell me.
Right. How is this going to make you better?
Funny. Yeah, because I think so many people come to the table, from like this position where they think they're the expert or whatever. So I think they come and they do try and impose kind of on you what you need, right? So let's have a conversation about what I can do for you,
Yeah.
and I think that is probably the sort of status quo, or that's the way that people normally approach it. But I mean, using Jonathan's example of if you were to go out to, a restaurant or something and then have somebody tell you, well, you're going to have the chicken. Well, yeah, but I really
Yeah.
want the food. No, you're having the chicken. Like, just
Yeah.
think
It's
how
a
like
better
off-putting
deal.
that conversation
Chicken's a
is.
better
You know what
deal.
I
That's what you're going to eat.
mean? Exactly.
So
And it's just, but it would be so off-putting or so presumptuous that, like, I mean, immediately, even if there was going to be a deal, or even if you are the best expert, now I just don't want to work with you.
I hear it all the time where people say, "How do I?" Customers always ask for the wrong thing. They think they need this, but what they really need is something I think they need. And on the one hand, I know what they mean, and there's some truth to it. But the way they ask the question is wrong. The way they ask the question, they're looking for me to tell them how to convince the buyer that they don't want the thing that they want, and to convince them that they want this other thing that the person I'm talking to sells. That's the used car salesman pushing the Kia Sorento. And it's like, look, you might think they're asking the wrong thing, but you don't actually have enough information to say that. In no case, probably no case, when someone comes to me with this kind of a problem, they've never asked the client what they're trying to achieve. They're just immediately like, no, you're asking for the wrong thing. What you really need is this. Here's how much it's going to be. And then they can't believe the person doesn't buy it, because it's, you use the perfect word, presumptuous. It is so obnoxiously presumptuous that it's just completely off-putting. And on top of it, you're probably wrong. There's probably some third thing. There's probably some middle ground between what they actually asked for, which I admit is often a mis self-diagnosis, but there's some truth in it that gets ignored if you just jump to your prescriptive. Imagine if you went to a doctor and the doctor is just like, takes one look at you and is like, here's what you need, and just doesn't diagnose anything, and just this is what you need. You'd be like, that's probably malpractice. Like, and that's the feel I get when people are like, oh, they're always asking for the wrong thing. It's like, well, you might want to drill into that a little.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and like using your example of the guy in the gym that, got the word from his buddy at in the gym that his logo was bad or whatever. It's like, it doesn't take much more than that to be perception. So how could you possibly guess at that? Like, I mean, there's no
Right.
chance that you as an expert are going to come and with all your business wisdom and what's worked for other clients and all these things, like you're never going to land on, oh yeah, there was that guy at the gym that he was
It's
working
always
out with.
way more nuanced. Yeah. It's way more nuanced in reality.
So you get the conversation out of the way. You know
Yes.
the why, the Simon Sinek why. Where do you go from there? How do you put a proposal together that is in the ballpark, that's not going to offend them, but is not going to leave you to where you're dealing with scope creep and problems down the road? You need to adjust for like changes and pivots, but you don't want to go too high, but you want to go too low. How do you actually kind of figure that out?
Yeah. Perfect segue. So once you have an idea what it's probably worth, what the outcome is probably worth to the client, then you've got a basis to set some prices on the value. So value pricing instead of cost pricing. So let's just say it's worth $100,000 in the first year. Let's say I'm going to build some kind of internal, like proprietary productivity system for the back office or something. That's what I used to do years ago. And I'd be like, well, why not, if you've got this productivity problem, why don't you just hire a couple more people? Because the software is probably going to cost more than hiring 2 admins. And so they'd say like, oh no, we can't hire 2 admins, and it's not a price objection. It's some other kind of objection. Like they would do that if they could, but they can't. So it's like, okay, I know this is worth at least $100,000 because that's like, less than 2 full-time salaries. And they would have done that if they could, but they didn't have the desk space or room or whatever. So, okay. So now I'm going to work backwards. So instead of scoping first, like basically everyone does, especially when they're doing hourly, I scope last. I haven't thought really at all about what I'm going to do at this point. So I've come out of the sales meeting and I still don't know what I'm going to do for them. Even if they ask for a specific thing, by the end of the call, I'll be like, well, you asked for this, but there might be some better ways for us to work together. Cheaper for you, cheaper for me, So would it be okay if I put together a proposal with some options? They're going to say yes. So I've got this $100,000 value, and I'm going to create 3 prices next that are based on that value. My rule of thumb is to use 10%, 22%, and 50%, which we could get into why, but basically that pricing curve, this Goldilocks pricing curve, drives people to the second option, which will sort of leave the least amount of money on the table and get you the best price and get them like something that's going to work for them. But that's just a rule of thumb. So then I say, okay, if it's $100,000 value and I've got 3 prices, that's 10%, 22%, and 50%, that's 10,000, 22,000, and 50,000. Now I start thinking about what could I do for $10,000 to move this needle. I know what the client wants. The client wants this internal system that they'll be able to sell to investors or that will increase the valuation of their business to buyers in 3 years. Okay, I know that. I'm confident that I can do this. But what can I do for $10,000 to get them to that point? Probably not that much, right? So $10,000 is like not a ton of money for a software product. So then I'd say, all right, what can I do here? And I'd come up with a scope last instead of first. I'd come up with a scope last that I'd be super fist-pumpingly happy to do for $10,000. So for $10,000, essentially I'm going to set my cost last. So scope last, cost last is the same thing. I'm going to set my cost last. So I want a floor. I want to set we talked earlier about what is the definition of cost. It's the least amount of money I'd accept to do this. I want to set my cost to be like $5,000. And I'm going to price it at $10,000. So if there's some scope creep or some smart changes, or we uncover something that was unexpected, happens every time, it's going to happen. So you might as well account for it. I won't care because I'll still be I've got like 100% margin here. So I do it for 5,000. That's my cost. I've got 5,000 on top of that. Great. So that's what I'm going to price it. This is the scope that I will bucket into that price. And so for a project like this, it'd be a little bit of a stretch, but probably I would do analysis with recommendations by interviewing the key people in each department, find out where the bottlenecks are, and come up with an SOP for clearing those bottlenecks without writing any software. So it would be something that would actually improve things, and there would be a binder, like a 3-ring binder of procedures for all of these, maybe identify 2 or 3 bottlenecks in the business, and it gives them a meaningful improvement. If they implement it, it gives them a meaningful improvement, and it could be the basis for software that they build at one of the higher tiers. So maybe and then I do the same thing at the $22,000 tier. I'll say, all right, what could I do? First, I'm going to do the analysis. I'm going to create the binders, the business logic of the workflow. And I'm going to say, well, I could probably create a couple of Zapier automations that plug together their existing software systems based on what's in this 3-ring binder to actually get them some increases in productivity. And that from the outside, that might look like, it's not software. It is software, but it's not homegrown software that they built themselves, but it's still proprietary. So it's going to give them a near-term improvement in productivity, and it'll still look like a process improvement from the outsider to a buyer. And then I do the same thing again at 50,000. Like, well, 50,000, maybe I don't use Zapier or one of these no-code tools. Maybe I do code up certain things, or I do get something, it's not a very big budget because the value is not that high. In this one, the previous one was $1 million. This is only 100,000. The value is not that high. So I can't go nuts and build them a whole Rails application and all of this. But maybe what I could do is get something like Airtable or something like that, and create macros that are all internal. There's a combination of no code or maybe Drupal, where I can write some PHP and actually do some code, but I'm not building the entire framework. And so that, it doesn't really matter what, these examples are. The idea is that once you have the price the value, once you have the value from the sales interview, you set 3 prices, and then you decide what you're going to do for each price. So the scope, i.e. your cost, comes last. And yeah, that's probably too long of a monologue, but that's the idea.
No, it actually it makes sense, because like if you figure out like the percentage or the actual dollar amount of what each tier is going to be, then you can mentally in your head be like, okay, so for 10 grand, I can actually do this and still make a profit. For 20 grand, I can do this and still make a profit. For 50 grand, I can do all of the above and make it customized, and then actually, give the client what they want. So you're kind of almost, you're taking the pain points, the things that are going to move the needle for the client, and you're putting them in the tier kind of that you ideally want to see, and then you kind of you're kind of steering them where they want to go almost, which is kind of a neat approach.
Yeah, it gives them options to choose from without having to like if you just give them one price, a lot of times they're going to shop around and they're going to take it to other people and say, hey, can you beat this price? But if you give them 3 options, now all of a sudden they're deciding what's the best way to work with you instead of should we work with you? And they'll start to have internal conversations around like, wow, should we pick 2 or 3 or like 1 or 2 or whatever? And then they're having those kinds of meetings. And, it's less likely that you'll leave money on the table because you've got you got a big range of options for them to choose from. So if you just gave them the $10,000 one and they would have bought the 50 if you had presented it to them, then yeah, you left money on the table. But I mean, this approach is a proven tried and true approach.
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to get into, there's actually a couple things I want to hit before we run out of time with you. But one thing, just as it pertains to sort of wrapping up the proposals thing, I just got back from London. I was out at this creative conference with a bunch of other agency owners with this guy, Mike Janda, that's like one of these business coach types. And I was out there with a bunch of other guys that are sort of in my position, running small agencies and doing this kind of work. And the conversation came up about, deposits and how much do you take down and things like that. Mike proceeded to go through everybody in the room and, raise your hand. How much do you ask for up front? All that stuff. And you go, oh, well, I take 25%, I take 50%, that kind of stuff. Well, I was the only guy in the room that said I take 100%. Yeah. And that's something that I learned from Jonathan years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, just, in total transparency, I do make exceptions on huge projects. Like we did a $100,000 job $100,000 job this year. And we, broke that into 3 payments or whatever, it's a bigger chunk of cash to come up with. But pretty much anything, I would say sub $25,000 or $30,000, we will charge 100% up front. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I sort of have installed at Jonathan's coaching. And so I wonder if you talk a little bit about just sort of your philosophy on, deposits and guarantees, because I think that's unique in the space.
Sure. Well, I didn't invent it, that's for sure. This is definitely from Value-Based Fees by Ellen Weiss, which is was my Bible for several years. But the idea is pretty straightforward. And it's that one of the benefits of giving a fixed price in the first place is that you can ask for 100% upfront. If it was an hourly estimate, you couldn't, because you don't really know how much it's going to be. Nobody knows really how much it's going to be. So you couldn't ask, you can ask for a small deposit or something, but if you don't know how much it's going to cost, then kind of out of luck. So giving a fixed price allows you to do this in the first place. And I suppose if there's anything sneaky about the whole proposal approach or the whole value-based pricing approach or the whole why conversation approach, it's that asking for 100% up front is purposely, you don't actually need 100% up front. It makes your life better, time value of money. It's more beneficial to you to get the money up front. But like you said, it's probably fine to break it into 2 payments or to break it into 3 payments, especially if it's bigger. But the real sneaky piece of it is that they're almost certainly not getting any other proposals that are asking for 100% upfront. It's really going to stand out. And what ends up happening is they don't even negotiate the prices. They want to negotiate the 100% upfront piece, because that's the more shocking piece. So it's like, okay, wow, these prices look pretty good, but 100% upfront, like that seems crazy. Couldn't we break it into like 50-50? That's usually the thing. Could we break it at 50-50, 50 upfront, 50 on sign off? And then would talk them into 2 payments, not based on sign off, because chasing people for the last payment is a nightmare for both parties. But if they want to negotiate the pricing terms, great. But guess what? We're not negotiating the prices. So I kind of don't care when they pay me, as long as I know they're going to pay me on a particular schedule. Like, some upfront for sure, just to make sure they're real and make sure they're bought in. But then, second payment in 30 days or 60 days, if it's going to be a really long project, that's fine. I'll concede that. I'll work with them on that. If they've got some, I don't know, if they're waiting for funding or they've got some cash flow thing, like I'll work with them, or maybe I'll even work with people in terms of like, well, if I can start putting your logo, if I can use you in my marketing materials immediately, or I'm totally fine negotiating stuff like that, the terms or whatever, but I'm just not going to negotiate the scope or the price. That's that. And like, I'll even, when I go to send the proposal, I'm like, okay, am I sure I'm willing to lose this project if I swung for the fences a little bit too hard? Am I okay to lose this at these prices? And because I'm like, I know I'm not going to lower them. I've never done it. So, okay, boom, there you go. There's your proposal. And the 100% upfront, that's a negotiating point. That's something you will concede if you need to. But wildly, much to my surprise,
it's a great observation.
Yeah, much to my surprise, probably 80% of my clients just paid it upfront and never mentioned it. So I was like,
yeah, it's funny because I didn't even think of that aspect of it. Because I just installed it because you said to, and so I started doing it. And then I found nobody pushed back on it, with the exception of people asking for, hey, can we break this up over a couple of payments or whatever? But you're right. They never come after the price. They always go after this. And so it is kind of funny because, I mean, I guess it's just that psychological thing, right? The pain point wasn't the price. The pain point is coming up with all of it now.
Well, you're almost pivoting the pain point, right. Like you're kind of sidetracking the fact that, oh, it's really expensive. But now that you're giving them the option, and like if you come at them and say, hey, I want 100% up front, and then you kind of relent and you take that, okay, we can do 3 payments. Now they feel like they won, but they didn't negotiate the price. So it's like a win-win for everyone.
It's just
like a psychology kind of like trick that you're playing that's working. And I kind of like that.
And I will say one other aspect of this too, and you hadn't touched on it yet, is there's sort of a guarantee built into your proposals too, which is this idea that, I guarantee your happiness, or your money back. And this is a pretty scary thing for a lot of people too. And I mean, we've imposed it even on these bigger jobs. It's still like 100% of your money back if you're not happy. Luckily, nobody's ever claimed it. But having it out there at the same time is, I mean, I think another one of those things. It's like it just takes all the pressure off the price. And then, you've got this new shiny thing, which is the terms. And now you've got this thing to argue about that's kind of arbitrary.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I do all sorts of different kinds of guarantees, and I recommend doing all sorts of different guarantees because it's a question of how much risk, who's going to shoulder how much risk between you and the client. And usually that depends on the engagement, what kind of guarantee I would recommend for someone. So it's not always a money back guarantee, or it's not always a money back guarantee like, a year from now. It might be, like on a retainer engagement, it might be something like, if at any time in the first 30 days you decide that this was a mistake and this is not for you, or I've behaved in some unprofessional manner or something like that, in the first month, it's 100% money back guarantee. But after the first month, then, obviously we're working together well, and like, you wouldn't need a guarantee after that anyway. But the thing about the guarantee is it's important, because some kind of guarantee, because if you're getting a fixed price and you're getting, some or all of the money up front, it's possible for them to think, well, now he's incentivized to cut corners and just finish this fast and maybe not good. So, okay. So how do we reverse that fear? How do we address that fear or reverse that objection that might be sneaking around in their minds? So if you know what those objections are, if you can find out what those objections are ahead of time, or if there's kind of obvious ones based on the sort of offering, you can just reverse those. So like maybe the thing is, like just a small thing, like if you imagine a sign up, if someone's signing up for your mailing list, what's the thing they're worried about? They're worried you're going to spam them or sell their email address. That's what they're worried about. So you just say right there, like, don't worry, I hate spam too. I'm never going to, I'm never going to share this with anyone. And I'm only going to email you the thing that I told you I was going to email you about. So it's like, what they're afraid of in certain situations. So like in some kinds of projects, they might be afraid, like a coding project, they might be afraid that you're going to just do a crappy job. It's going to be full of bugs. And so I'd offer a bug-free guarantee. So, for 12 months after completion, any bug that crops up will fix for free. And that's a huge relief to someone who's maybe never done a big software project before, or even if they had and they've been screwed by some agency that just disappeared as soon as they got sign off. And I'd say like, yeah,
I've been there.
And so what's that going to do? If I know that's my guarantee, then it doesn't make any sense for me to cut corners. I'm going to comment my code really well. I'm going to do all the things that basically it's out of a feeling of self-preservation. I'm going to do a good job for them because I don't want to be fixing bugs for 12 months. So I'm going to do, and so that if that's the objection, they might be afraid like, oh, we're going to give this guy $100,000. He's going to do a crappy job and then give us a buggy pile of crap. Then it's like, well, no, because then I'll just be fixing it for 12 months. And so it just reverses the thing that they might be worried about. So it doesn't even need to be directly. The guarantees are wild. Guarantees are like a whole episode, because if you think of like a very famous guarantee was the Papagino's guarantee, 30 minutes or it's free. And so what are they guaranteeing? They're not guaranteeing the pizza's going to be good. They're just guaranteeing that it's going to be there fast. It's like, you want a fast pizza. You don't really care what it tastes like. If you wanted a good pizza, you'd probably go somewhere else. So they know you want a fast pizza and you're afraid you're going to order the pizza. And then by the time it gets here, the party's already like everyone's leaving and like the food didn't get here in time. So their core, it's funny because they're not guaranteeing anything about the product. They're guaranteeing something about the experience of the product, like the delivery of the product. So it could be the same with what you do.
Their stakes are lower in that example, though, too. Like a $15 pizza's completely. If they're late, it's no big deal. It is what it is. But that ad and the guarantee by offering the 30-minute delivery, say 90% of them fit in that category, they're going to get more sales based off of that, and it's going to be a win-win for them. Right. Whereas $100,000 project with a software thing, it's a little bit more of a, there's more on the table.
Right. So I think go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask you if you had a few minutes left, but go ahead and finish your thought.
Sure. Yeah. With a software project, the client's not worried about, they don't want their money back. Like after a year of working on a software project with you, they don't want their money back. They'd probably still sue you, even if you gave them their money back. What they want is the thing working. So to guarantee money back on a year-long software project, it kind of doesn't make sense because that's not the remedy that they'd be looking for. The remedy they're looking for is they want the thing working. They want it to not be buggy. So it's a more appropriate guarantee, in my opinion, to give a bug-free guarantee and not a money-back guarantee in that case. On the total flip side, for something like a $25 ebook, 100% money-back guarantee makes total sense because you made the book, like there's zero incremental, cost to sell it another one. And if somebody doesn't like it, you'd rather give them their money back than have them say, out there saying this guy's a jerk or doesn't know what he's talking about. So it really depends on what you're selling and your risk level and what the client's worried about. So it doesn't, you don't want to guarantee something that they don't care about, right? That wouldn't make sense. So this again comes back to the why conversation.
Yeah. It's funny how many of these things are sort of like looped together in terms of like risk mitigation, right? I mean, like you're setting at ease, like basically all the things that the, prospective customer or the customer has before you even get there. And, so, I mean, it's pretty clever approach, I think.
I mean, it stems from my desire to create customer satisfaction. That's what I want. I want happy customers. The more happy customers I have, the better I'm going to do.
Yeah. So I wonder, Jonathan, do you have like maybe a couple minutes if I keep you over just a second?
Yeah, sure,
I know we're kind of getting to the end of the hour. And the only reason is because I think it's kind of an important thing just to at least brush on a little bit, which is we maybe put our cart ahead of the horse a little bit. I mean, part of these tactics work really well with this, with the why conversation and all this stuff. And I think anybody could put these things into practice today. But one thing that you sort of touched on really early in the conversation was this idea of authority. And, you can start to position yourself as a Mercedes if you want to, but it does take time and it does take growth. And I know you have a podcast, The Business of Authority, and I know that this notion of being the authority in a space could be critical to the amount of money you can ask for or the types of proposals you're giving. And so I wonder if we couldn't talk just briefly about just sort of, what is authority? How do we develop it? And that aspect of our business, if we truly want to maybe refine and grow beyond just, improving our sales process, how could we actually start to develop authority?
Yeah. I mean, the way I define the term is an authority. Like, it's not enough to be an expert. Like, probably everyone listening to this is an expert at the thing that they do. You've been doing it for 5 or 10 years, whether it's design or architecture or software development. You've probably been doing it for a while, and you might not call yourself an expert, but you're like way better at it than like your clients. Maybe you're way better at it than most of your peers, but that's not an authority. An authority is a recognized expert. An authority is the kind of person that would get called in to be an expert witness at a trial, where for some reason, people in a market, some group of people who are not your peers, or it could be your peers, but I like it better when it's not your peers. I like it better when it's your buyers. They recognize you as an expert at this thing. And usually the way that works, especially for buyers, when they recognize you as an authority, it's based on some results. So like you might be like the best person in the world at like, well, what did I say before? Corinthian pottery. Like, you might know everything about Corinthian pottery, but it doesn't deliver results for anyone. Like, no one cares. So who maybe cares? This is going to be a tough one. So who would care? Maybe you are an expert for an auction house that deals in antiquities, and they have a huge liability if they accidentally auction off something that turned out to be fake. And you have been doing this for, I don't know, the Louvre or something that has the biggest collection of Corinthian pottery. Totally in fantasy land here. I'm making this up, but let's just say someone has a lot of money at stake and you have saved them, right? So like this, it's not just that you wrote the book on it and you know more about it than anybody else, and all of your peers wish they were you because you're so smart about Corinthian pottery. It's that people who can give you money recognize that by giving you money, they save or make money. So if the auction house is like, new auction house has this new piece that's come in, they don't know if it's real or fake. And they know that you've been working with a competing auction house for 10 years and you've discovered like 15 fakes. Now, all of a sudden, if they're going to auction this thing off for $1 million, now all of a sudden it's worth a lot of money for them to call you and only you to verify the authenticity of it, because then that will increase the amount of money they get at auction, because it's been verified by this person who everyone recognizes as the authority on Corinthian pottery. So it doesn't matter. This guy or gal might know that there's a bigger expert than they are, but not everyone trusts them. No one knows them. This first person is famous at delivering a result. It's not just a question of a I don't know, some sort of litmus test of how much knowledge you have about Corinthian pottery. So that was probably a terrible example, but or maybe it's a great example because it's such an abstract thing.
Well, I was going to say, you evoked the Louvre, and they got robbed this morning from a smashing grab. So I guess they need a security guy, so anybody out there that's in the security might be a good time to anchor high with the Louvre.
Yeah, whoever did the security for Louvre is now infamous, not famous.
Well, I was just thinking of like a mechanic, like you buy a new car and you have that friend or that homie that's the mechanic that's been there for a while that can, you can look at this detailed car from the lot, like they spit shined it and polished it up and it looks great to you. You take it to the mechanic and he looks underneath and he sees an oil leak out of your gearbox or something like that. He's going to see the stuff that you're not. And that's why you always have that second opinion. That's why you have the person in authority, the person that knows what they're talking about, look at it and be the professional. And, whether it's a logo or whether it's a speaker, it's all a matter of who you know and how much they know and how much, accountability and reliability that you can put on that person. So.
Yeah.
And
well,
how
and
many
I think
people know that. So it's like the size of the audience that knows that.
Yeah, that's the nice point, right? I mean, it's one thing if somebody comes to you to build a website for them or whatever, and you're the web design expert or you're the web design guy I know. But if you're the authority, if you're like Mr. Website or you're Mr. whatever your genre of website is, then, you can fetch higher prices. You're going to be able to do more with that engagement than you might if you're not. So I think that's where the power of authority can really start to come in, is that you can start to elevate your brand or your business or whatever it is. And I know there's a lot of discussion back and forth on the niching and or niching, whichever camp you're
either
in.
way.
And, but I know that there's, a lot of discussion around that or whatever, but it's hard to be an authority in everything, where it's easier to become an authority in a single thing or a small view of things. So it's
narrowing the focus is almost a requirement. Yeah.
Yeah. So it almost forces you into that. So if there's any argument for niching or against niching, I think that's at least one practical way of looking at it, which is, even if you don't agree with it, you can certainly become more expert if you narrow your view.
Yeah. The thing that
Jonathan,
I would,
it's
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We're way over. We could, I'll end up talking for another 45 minutes if we get into positioning. So it's probably a good place to leave it.
Yeah, no, I think there's, plenty more we could cover. And that's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of content in here. I had some questions too. I want to get your take on AI and some other stuff like that too, because I think that's going to affect a lot of service businesses down the road, but we'll just have to do it again.
Yeah. It's part 2.
Cool. Well, yeah, we're at the end of the time, Jonathan. So do you just want to take a quick minute, let people know where they can track you down, how they can get onto your daily email list, et cetera?
Sure. So we talked a lot about value-based pricing today. So I would send people to valuepricingbootcamp.com, and that'll redirect you to a page on my website that has like a 6 email free course that goes into these subjects in some more detail. And you can reply to any message that goes right to my inbox. I don't have any employees or admins or anything like that.
Yep. And you have a book too as well, right?
Yeah, a couple. Hourly Billing is Nuts and Learn Your Lines and Pigeonhole Yourself, which is about positioning. Yeah, so you can find those on my website, jonathансtark.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jonathan. It was awesome to catch up with you again and sit and espouse all the things. I'm sure you recognized all the lessons from the past. It took me a long time to act on them back then, but I did a little better this time, I think.
Great. Love it.
So cool. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, and thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. See you guys.